This fight really started back in 2000 in Arizona and Colorado. The National Sierra Club ran amendments similar to hometown democracy in both of those states. And the voters there overwhelmingly defeated both of those initiatives. But some of our members worked on dealing with those issues in the states that they do business in. The next step that really happened was in 2002. You all remember that the state of Florida granted special rights to pregnant pigs in the Constitution. Well, it was embarrassing, obviously, for Florida to then grant special rights to a farm animal. But what it did was signal to national special interest groups that Florida's Constitution was a testing ground for policies that they weren't being successful in implementing elsewhere. So in 2003, a Sierra Club lawyer introduced Florida Hometown Democracy, calling it a grassroots initiative, saying that she had developed it herself. But Leslie Blackter had spent the better part of the past decade representing the Sierra Club in various lawsuits against local government, state government, and business interests. So this was a natural progression. After they see the Pregnant Pig Amendment, they say, look, Florida is the place that we're going to try out this amendment that failed in Arizona and Colorado. Next up was in 2004. And if you remember that Florida passed the minimum wage increase. But what a lot of people didn't talk about then was that ACORN was the main driver behind that. And they were using it as a turnout mechanism for the John Kerry for President campaign. So it was the further evolution of Florida constitutional amendment process, and using it had to achieve broader electoral goals. At the same time in 2004, one of the things that the state of Florida did, the Florida Chamber supported, was moving the signature gathering deadline to February 1st. Prior to that, it had been 90 days before an election that you had to get your signatures in to the Department of State. So it ended up giving special interest groups an opportunity to take voters by surprise, to introduce an amendment, give them very little time to study it. So the voters in that year moved the deadline to February 1st. The other thing that happened was that hometown democracy missed the ballot for the first time. The Florida Supreme Court rejected their original language, threw them out, so hometown had to start collecting petitions again in 2005. 2006, they still had not collected the petitions they needed. That was the second time they'd missed the ballot. The other key thing that happened that year was that the 60% initiative passed. What that did was raise the threshold in Florida so that any amendment that is going to go into the Constitution has to pass by 60%. So you now have two key reforms that have occurred over the course of this timeline. The other thing that happened in 2006, which people didn't really notice very much at that time, was that St. Pete Beach, on a local referendum, amended its charter to become the first city in the state of Florida to become fall under the hometown democracy rules. They adopted a baby hometown democracy initiative so that all of the comp plan changes that would have to occur in the city of St. Pete Beach would have to go to a vote of the people. And Ryan is going to talk more about what that has led to in St. Pete Beach and the lawsuits and the costs that have come from that. In 2007, property rights legislation was passed by the legislature, saying that unless you have the permission of a property owner, you can't collect petitions on their property. Seemed pretty common sense, but it wasn't the law prior to 2007. That year, our partners also across the state created Floridians for Smarter Growth, which is the organization that Ryan runs. And with knowing that whether it's 2008 or 2010, we needed a campaign to be ready to defeat hometown democracy. Hometown missed the ballot again for the third time in 2008. Even after they'd spent millions of dollars buying signatures, bringing in people from out of state to go and collect signatures, they were unable to make the ballot. They blamed Floridians for Smarter Growth for their failure, but ultimately you're looking at they'd been out there for 5 years collecting petitions. They had still not convinced enough Florida voters to go and support their amendment. But by 2009, after continuing to spend money, again, upwards of $2 million over the entire course of their campaign, they did finally reach the ballot. So they are now Amendment 4.